All righty, welcome to this evening's special meeting of the Lebanon Redevelopment Commission. Today is Wednesday, the 18th of September, and it is a few minutes after 6. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and as per tradition, we'll go ahead and start out with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll go ahead and lead it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so please let the record state that we have 3 out of 5 commissioners, and the 2 commissioners missing are excused. The new business and the only item of business for this evening is the I-65 feasibility study that we have some paperwork on, and we need to discuss with Mr. Ben Bontrager.
All right. I wish I could say I dressed down for this meeting on purpose, but this is pretty much the only thing I can put on with one arm, so this is what we get.
You look good. You look good. We'll take you.
All right, a little bit of background here. I hope you all had a chance to review the information that I forwarded to you yesterday. And again, being out, I didn't even know until yesterday what this meeting was about, so I got filled in pretty quick after last week being gone. We've been working with Mr. Brent Benge, for a number of months now, about as long as been working with him on the Gateway Marketplace project, which is under construction on South Street and 65 that he's been working on. And we talked to him about looking at his, next projects, next areas where we're hoping to develop in the city of Lebanon. And the one area that was really a high priority for us, or a long-term high priority for us, is this area, State Road 39, Interstate 65, kind of that southeast quadrant. The city owns 11 acres or so right there at the interchange. It used to be the old Holiday Inn site, so we own that, kind of the key piece. Then there are thousands of acres as you look at that entire area. And it was really important to us to try to figure out how we could get the right kind of development at the interchange that's going to spur the rest of that development, really be the right development for the rest of that area, this being the key piece that we own. In discussions over the last probably 12 months with Mr. Benge, what we really decided as we're talking to him is that we wanted to try to find some sort of destination type of use to anchor this area. We didn't just want to say, well, we could probably get a couple hotels, a couple restaurants, maybe some fast food. We want something to really be a destination type of use that's going to bring people both from Lebanon, but also bring people from this area, from this region to Lebanon. And we started brainstorming with him what some of those ideas might be. We threw a number of things on the wall to see what would stick. Excuse me. And then Brent kind of liked some of the ideas, so he said, I'm going to make the commitment and the investment to go ahead and secure options on property in this area. And then I'm going to start going out and talking with folks that invest in projects we've talked about to try to see if we get something that we might be able to get somebody on the hook. And he started doing that probably about 6 months ago. He's reached out to folks as far as wide as large indoor water parks, entertainment facilities, sports arenas or sports facilities, really something that's going to drive people to this area. And the one that seemed to gain a little bit of traction was the idea of the indoor water park, and he specifically spoke with folks like Great Wolf Lodge and some of those larger folks that make huge investments into resorts. And he actually made it up their food chain a little bit. The regional folks said this looks like a great idea. We think we want to investigate this further. As it got further up the food chain, the word came back that, well, we kind of have 2 facilities in this area. They have one in Cincinnati and one north of Chicago. We're concerned we're going to steal sales and market share from those facilities. We're not sure right now that we want to go much further with this site. But the one thing as you know, Brent's familiar with this, and one thing that they said is that we don't have the study or the information that shows us what this market could bear in this area. What kind of sales, what sort of additional sales might be available, what size the facility probably should be to attract or for this market. And so that's what Brent had actually gone out to a firm, and I know I sent the copy of that to you. This is an extremely rough draft, may not be exactly the scope that we'll be looking for if we look at doing something, to try to identify and define what the market would be for a large user like this. And we're talking about $50 to $100 million facilities. These are massive facilities that are built by firms like this. So it's a big investment, it's a big project. They don't just look for a good site and start building. There's a lot of work that goes into these. And Brent had secured that, and about the same time, his options are starting to run out. So he came to us and said, I think there's an opportunity here, but we need as the collective group to decide whether we want to move forward with a feasibility study like this to help further define this market. And then let's take it back to groups like Great Wolf Lodge and say, hey, look, we've done the research. It shows that X type of facility would work here, and this is the market it would drive, and this is how it would not affect your other facilities. Hopefully that's what it says.
Ben, before you go on,
Yeah.
apologize for the interruption, but you had mentioned options.
Yeah.
And I think that may not be clear to everyone watching. Can you go into a little more detail when you say his options are running out? Not that.
Yes, yeah, so he has not purchased the properties. What he's
So
done
those
is,
are land owning options?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just trying to make that clear for everybody.
Yep. So he has purchased essentially an option to purchase, but you have to pay to maintain an
Right.
option to purchase. So, and usually when you secure an option, there's a certain time period during which that time period you have to buy the property. You can always extend those as long as the property owners are willing to do that. Now he's coming to the point where his first options, that time period is getting ready to expire. So we need to figure out whether this is something he felt like the city, the redevelopment commission, everybody here wanted to pursue further. If so, he was willing to make the additional investment to extend his options out while we looked at doing this. And that's kind of what we've been doing over the last month or so, is looking at this in further detail with him. So he passed along, we had a meeting with him probably about, what was it, a month to 6 weeks ago, probably at least, maybe even 2 months ago already. And he passed along the information that I forwarded to you yesterday, just some general information about why you do studies like this and what the benefit is. And then also that initial proposal, and just kind of put it in our laps to say, this is something we really want to pursue, and he would really like some assistance, and I think it shows good faith on the city's part to be able to make this initial investment to really get the ball rolling, showing we're serious about it as much as he is. So that's what we passed on to you, and I know there was a meeting with a couple of you last week to talk with Brent about this, and I know Brent wanted to be here tonight, but he's traveling this week. So he wasn't able to come and kind of fill in further, but he really feels strongly that there is an opportunity here if we're able to kind of get the ball rolling downhill by doing this feasibility study. I think what had been discussed last week, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, is what we wanted to do tonight is discuss funding and not to exceed amount for a study, and then we would go out and seek at least 3 proposals from 3 different firms. And selecting this firm is just as important as the amount or anything else. You really want to have someone that has the expertise, the experience in doing these types of studies specifically, but then also you want to find a firm that has worked with the companies that build these facilities. So somebody that's worked with the Great Wolf Lodge or everybody else that's up in the Dells where I was this summer. You want somebody that has relationships with those firms too, because then they have the clout with those firms to be able to convince them of these things. The firm that in the proposal that I sent you, the draft, that's one of those firms, but there are others that we'd like to solicit from as well. The other thing we may do is, I know the mayor, there's some other uses he would like to include in this feasibility study. So the scope may expand a little bit to include some other types of uses. That'll be similar but a little bit different in the way that you might have to do the feasibility study. So we may do that as well. I know that the indoor large, the resort water park that's included in that proposal, that's one of the primary ones. But I know the other thing we wanted to look at further is some sort of sports arena or sports facility, because we have seen some interest in that as well. And there's actually an investment group that has been talking to the mayor, and we may have a follow-up meeting soon related to that as well. But to be able to have that information in our pocket, to be able to say, look, here's what the market says about this type of use. This is something that might work. It's something we did just a few years ago with a housing market study, housing demand study, and we've been using it every day since then to show to residential developers in all types of markets what might be possible here, and it's been very beneficial to us. So, any questions?
Yes.
I can answer? Yeah.
Yes, Ben. I think some of us have an idea of 2 different options on what that not to exceed amount might look like, or what that number is. Can you tell us what we should expect for studies like this on the scope and size of them?
Yeah, and there was the scope that was included in the one that I sent you. It's about 40. Certainly that one's targeted
specific.
specifically to the water parks. A lot of the background data that would use, if you were also going to include another type of use like the sports facility, is going to be similar.
Like the
So there's
I-65
certainly-
traffic, that's
Yeah.
going to be there regardless of
Yeah,
what
the
facility's there.
demographic data is the same
Sure.
no matter what type of facility you're looking for. Some of the market research may touch a little bit differently, but you're using a lot of the same background data, so I think there's some economies of scale to it. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm guessing somewhere around 75 is probably a pretty good number.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Does this, would we, when we make that request for proposals, would we be looking at ones that are specialty and possibly select 2 or 3 of them? Do we need to ask for 5 proposals, or do we need to concentrate on one that can do them all for economies of scale?
We will have to see whether we can find one that has the capabilities to do both.
Okay.
This group that, in the proposal, I don't know if they have the capabilities beyond specifically the water parks. It seems like they have a specialty area there, but they may do others, but we'll have to do some investigation to find if we can find one firm that can do both. I think there are probably some out there. Like you said, there's some similarities in the study that you would do.
Sure.
So I'm sure we can find somebody that can do it, but more importantly, that water park is kind of a key one. We want to make sure we have the right one for that.
Is there any reason that we can't share the housing study data and make use of that as well? And maybe
absolutely.
potentially provide a discount, potentially?
It
or-
might help. I mean, that's,
I mean, it's going to save them hours in research.
yeah. It will definitely help. I don't know how much. I know there's very specific data beyond that
Sure.
to look for as well, but it certainly is beneficial to them to have
You
that.
can save a day's worth of labor's work, you know,
Yeah.
research work, a couple grand maybe. It is a $100 million job. I'm not worried about saving a couple grand, but I'm trying to be
Sure.
responsible with what we already have.
Yeah,
I don't
you
want
got
to
it. You
put a
got it.
study at wayside if we already have the information.
We will pass along everything we have that might be
Sure.
beneficial to this study.
Sierra, you had a question?
So, yeah, I was just gonna clarify, so, are we gonna be contributing to what types of studies, like the demographic? Sorry, how I'm gonna word this. So are we gonna be contributing to, you know, like you said, there's one specific to the water park, there's one specific to sporting arena, like, you know, different options. So, how are we gonna know what avenues you're choosing? Do you know-
30
do you know what
grand
I'm
towards
saying?
water parks,
Yeah,
40
geared
grand towards concerts,
yes,
40
like-
grand towards sports,
Yes,
whatever.
exactly, like,
Yeah.
I just,
It seems like the ones that have kind of generated the most traction are the sports facility and the water park. I think that's going to be our focus for now. If we're seeing that we should expand further than that, I think we come back to you because you're starting to spread yourselves a little thin, I think. I think particularly the water park is one we want to focus on, but we have seen some traction from the athletic facility. In fact, the mayor and I went and visited with somebody late last year, so we're definitely seeing that there may be some interest there. So those are the 2 primary ones that I think would be our focus.
it just, for me, it makes me a little hesitant to go so gung-ho for the water park because, you know, Caribbean Cove, that was 20 minutes down the road, closed down, you know, didn't do well, and that's literally 20 minutes from
Yeah.
here.
There's a
So-
lot of reasons why
Oh,
that should-
I understand
yeah.
that, but you'd see why
Lafayette
some
also
people might be
removed theirs.
hesitant, you know,
Sure.
towards wanting to do
Yeah,
that.
understood, yeah.
So what I would say is that if, you know, you would be the one obviously running this, you know, being the go-between for the study, is we need to be careful not to become too specific.
Oh, sure.
So that, and we also need to make sure that we build some sort of scale so it's apples to apples. So you've done a great job with the downtown project and the other projects, so I think that'll continue. A few of the questions I have are more, I would say like semantics more than anything, because who's going to own that study? Will own that study, right? The city will?
The city will, absolutely.
Okay. So in my mind, I look at that and I say we have 11 acres sitting there. I think it'd be worth it to just invest in trying to understand what we could do with that 11 acres anyways. So,
Absolutely.
so I see that as an investment in just understanding what we could do with it, right? The other thing I think of is that this angle towards a specific industry, I wasn't aware of the audience meaning the consultants that could actually quote the job. We may need to solicit bigger or more than I expected. So you do a great job of filtering that for us. Do you see any problem sort of managing that same thing so we're not seeing 25
I don't
proposals?
think so. I mean, I think it's going to become pretty obvious pretty quick which
Okay.
firms have the capabilities to do what we're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think there are 25 firms that can do this.
Right. It's
right,
very
well,
limited
you know,
selection.
still.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. the concept is still there. And then let me ask this question. When we get this study and we go through the exercise, how long is it typically valid?
I would say it's something that's valid for several years. At some point, then you have to go back and look at some of that market data to see if things have
Right.
changed. But usually these studies are for like a 3 to 5 year period. I think that's what our housing study was, a 5-year time horizon. So that's a pretty valid time horizon.
I'll ask Dr. Taylor that same question, since being the superintendent, you've, I'm sure, looked at plenty of data. How long would you look back and still accept the results of a study?
It's a great question. Over the last 10 years, that time frame of applicability for a study has greatly reduced itself. We used to do 5-year studies, 10-year studies. Now we're looking at 2- and 3-year studies. And part of that is the changing workforce issues in Indiana, and specifically here for Lebanon. So some of the studies, Mr. President, we looked at were more in reference to residential development. And then the data that was looked at was census data, was birth data, was family income data, those types of things. And that's changed. If we were to do a study in '08, before the recession, that data would have been totally skewed if we'd have tried to apply that post '08. Now we're at more in a bull market, so to speak, and so data we look at now will be applicable until there's an economic factor that is significant enough to change. So I think, to answer your question, which was a great question, 18 to 24 months would probably be about the length of reliability I would give to a specific utilization study. Now, there's some broad-based studies, traffic up and down, 65, how many car passes do we have a day? So those things there's some a little more applicability with longevity to those than to say, so we talk about, is it a specific study just for a water park? Guy with gray hair doesn't do too many water parks. But I realize water parks for younger generations and younger families is not only a destination stop, as in the Great Wolf Lodge concept, but is also an attraction, because that will then attract ancillary economic development such as restaurants, hotels, retail shops, and that in turn will require people to work at those, and that will then hopefully generate residential housing. So I see this as a kind of a feeding circle. And so the study itself, while we may not develop a water park, we may look at a sporting complex. To be quite honest, 7-8 years ago when I was on the RDC, we were talking about this. When we purchased the Holiday Inn property, it was with the intention of developing a destination property that would bring people to Lebanon, not allow them just to kind of pass through and like a restaurant. We're going to stop and grab a bite to eat and get some gas. So the concepts that I've dealt with in that property that have been come across us has been everything from IKEA was talked about to one of the larger sporting good, I won't say it right, but okay.
Yeah, sporting goods.
Yeah, but Cabela's or whatever.
Cabela's.
And then that was to go to Greenwood, and then Greenwood lost it. And so looking at a lot of those types of things. The key to all of that was the acquisition of the additional property. Well, the Holiday Inn property was great property, and everybody likes it because of its exposure and its access. In order to really maximize your return of investment, you really have to have additional acreage. And so when we talked a little bit earlier last week, I think, it was about how do we secure those options to have viable determination. And that's a financial obligation that won't fall on us, it'll fall on the developer. But this is an assistance, I believe, to the developer to help secure those options in a way. There's some things that I don't think any of us want there. I won't go into specifics, but, if someone wants to sell their property, they may not care what goes on that property. They may just want to sell it. We care what goes on that property. And so right now, in my opinion, we're working with an individual that has like-minded thinking, is willing to work with us. But somebody else could sell that property, and nothing against big boxes, don't get me wrong, but we do not need a big box logistics storage facility. In my opinion, this is Bob Taylor opinion, we don't need that kind of development on that property. That would not maximize our return of investment. So I'm kind of hedging on, okay, if we have to move forward with this, and I understand that, then let's do it right. So we maximize our ROI on this property and the options that go with the additional property. I got way off track on the answer to your question, Jason, but
No, thanks for going through with it, because that was gonna be my next question from 8 years ago, was what was your lessons learned? Well, it was the additional property and a like-minded developer.
you know, and I remember we took some criticism. You know, when we bought the property, there was some demolition costs to give a little history on it. If those of you recall, there was what used to be I think Holodome was the official. I wasn't here. I actually stayed in the Holiday Inn. That's how long I've been around. So there was some concern that RDC was buying some property and was going to have to put money into it. Well, we demolished the property, and it's sitting there, and I've heard a half dozen suggestions about what should go there. This is the closest I've been into discussion with actually looking and moving forward. But all those discussions were that site of land as it sits that we own is basically a gateway to the other acreage that's there. So we kind of own the gateway. And we're not going to maximize that property until we have options on the other properties, until whoever has options. So water park, yeah. If I were to go to the middle school and say, hey, we're building a water park, they'd be the greatest guy around. If I were to go to Cowan's at lunch with some folks that are eating lunch there, probably not a big deal. But I think we've talked about some sports complex. We've had some interest from universities and colleges about kind of relocating here, which is exciting to me. I think that's one thing we could benefit from. The Gene Haas, Vincennes partnerships have been good, but it would be good if we associated our community with a name-recognized higher education institution, and if that's sporting, that's fine. You just got to get on 32 and travel east for about 20 minutes, and you'll see what a sporting complex generates for a community. And you look at Grand Park. So I'm in, you know, you didn't ask, I'm in favor of this. I would like to see how we can maximize multiple utilizations for the study. I think there may be a need to look at two separate studies. But at the same time, I trust Ben and his department to make sure that if we do put an RFP out, that our RFP will allow us the opportunity to maximize whatever amount of money we set aside to do this project. But I understand, and it was a great question, we own those. So for the next 24 months, we'll own those studies, and we can utilize those for other entities if we so
We'll
choose.
own them in perpetuity as long as
Okay,
they're valid.
well,
Yeah.
perpetuity is great, but it's not going to be
Data-
applicable
Yeah.
beyond 24
Somebody,
months.
yes.
Especially if you have
Yeah.
drastic
But yes, it would be our study, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of the RFP process, do you use like a plan house that reaches, I mean, it's obviously all online, so anybody in theory could find it, but how do you do your outreach on that?
I would
making sure we reach
anticipate we're going
across
to
the
do a
country?
little bit of research on who has the capabilities first and
Okay.
actually specifically invite them.
Okay.
In some cases, I know even when we did the housing study, we actually interviewed some folks before we even sent them the RFP, just so
Okay.
we understood what their capabilities were. So we may do some of that too.
Okay.
Once we identify, I mean, we're going to identify as many as we can.
Sure.
but
I just didn't want to
certainly-
be stuck to a 5-state range when there was the right one out in California.
Right, right. Yeah, we're definitely not going to limit ourselves locally. We're going to do it. We're going to do a wide search because you're
Okay.
right. I mean, we're not going to find too many firms in
Sure.
Indiana that do this type of work.
Sure.
So.
When we would put those out sometimes, Caleb, but we would also go to some of the bigger players in Indiana, like Simon's, Washington
Oh, okay.
Prime.
They know all the
and just
players.
pick up the phone and say, hey, we're looking, this is what we're looking for. What do you have you might recommend?
Yeah.
Sure.
Instead of just picking up the phone and, saying, well, who's in Indianapolis so we could, yeah. So Ben's looking at the galactic search of RFPs, so he's going all out. But
Sure.
sometimes we would engage, because it wasn't our normal business.
Right.
So we would reach out, and they were generally the feedback we got from those kind of entities, developers, or larger corporations in Indianapolis, very positive. They're not in competition. This is actually, most of them would say,
for
yeah,
them.
that's a good idea. Can you share it with us when you get it done?
Okay.
So-
I was curious, so.
So as far as these studies go, are there any state or federal grants that could beef up what we would have available to execute the study?
Not any that I'm aware of for a study like this.
Okay.
This specialized. I know the state of Indiana has more for general studies like comprehensive plans or strategic plans, but
Okay.
nothing to this level of specificity that I'm aware of.
Okay, okay. So, commissioners, what other questions do we have, comments, statements?
Do we need to establish a not to exceed tonight, or do we want to start the interview process and kind of get a feeler out for what's appropriate?
I think the reason we had a special meeting to try to expedite this process is because Mr. Benj's options are starting to expire. I think he wanted to see that we were making an effort to get this process moving, and then he would go out and secure extensions on his options. So I think that's why we're hoping to maybe just get that not to exceed set up tonight, so then he'll go out and get those options. And
Is it unreasonable to the commission to start with a maybe $50,000 or $60,000 and then make an amendment as we see fit if we're presented with one?
I would say that I'm for that if we move that route, but the pacing element's going to be Ben's process.
Sure.
What does that do to you?
We don't have to specify that amount in our RFP. In fact, I don't think we would, because we're going to do more of a qualifications-based selection. And if they tell us it's going to cost $90,000 to do it, then we'll come back to you. So if you want to do it that way, we can, or if you can just set it at 100 and then know we have plenty, it's totally up to you. But we're gonna select based on qualifications,
if we don't-
not who's going to give us the best price.
We set it at 100 and we only get one at 60, then and it's money back in the bank too. So I mean, there's advantage to both sides.
Well, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah.
One comment, yeah, go ahead.
I just
Sarah.
say, just for clarification, we are going to entertain the options of a wide scope.
Yeah, absolutely.
A wide
yes.
scope, okay,
Yes.
just making sure.
And that will make it cost more. I mean, certainly
Right.
40,000 to do one for a water park's one thing. If we're going to look at 3 or 4 different types of use options, it will cost more.
We are a public entity, therefore we have, all public has access to our meetings. My only hesitation, setting it at 100,000 and then saying, well, if they come in at 60, my experience has been, good companies are going to come back and watch this and they're going to say, hey,
Yeah, let's
they've
take it.
authorized 100, we're coming in at 99,999.
Yeah.
I don't, if it takes 100, I guess what I want to say is I want to do it appropriately. I don't want it to come up short. I don't want it to save a dime to cost us 100 million.
Right.
But at the same time, I think I would like to put a relatively agreed upon number with the option, if Ben goes through it all and says, hey, we're at this or this, we come back at that point and say, yeah, we're good. I mean, I want you to have the authority, Ben, to leave tonight to start the process, knowing that the funding is there. But I'm somewhat hesitant to put a higher dollar amount, because, I've heard everything, to be quite honest, from 35,000 to 75,000. And I know that you can't pin that down, and I'm not asking you to. And we want quality, because as much as the content of the report, who did the report will have as much influence with someone interested in investing and developing as much as what the report says.
Right.
So, if Jason and I do it, probably we'll charge a lot of money, but they're not going to like what we have to say.
Let me ask you this. I was actually going to do qualifications-based selection. I was not going to ask for a price proposal. So we were actually going to select based on qualifications, get your blessing on that individual or firm, and then go back and work out a price with them. Would you rather I do a price proposal and ask for their number up front instead? I prefer to do qualifications-based, because I think they give you a more honest response.
So
than
what I'm
somebody
hearing
to
is we
try to
don't need to
lowball
set a notice to exceed tonight.
The only caveat I would put, Ben, is I don't want this to drag out 6 to 12 months.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm intending
This is
this
a
to be quick.
60-day, maybe 90-day
I-
process.
I would like to come back to you with some proposals at your next regularly scheduled meeting.
And October
If at
14th.
all possible.
Right, but if my concern here is that Mr., is it Benj? Is that how you say his last name? If Mr. Benj, he's looking for us to have an act of good faith, and he could watch this meeting and see that. I say we just set this would be my motion, or my suggestion, would be that we set the not to exceed number maybe lower than expected so that at least there's something set to say, hey, we're not just talking pie in the sky, we're actually ready to commit to move forward. I appreciate Ben's fiscal responsibility. I don't think he'll spend it foolishly, so I trust we could set it, and if we don't spend it, great.
So
So
based
would
on
you-
that, then, we have a proposal in front of us specifically from Water Park Concentration Consultant that seems to be very thorough, and they're right at 40 grand. If we need to expand it to other areas, okay, another firm that does sports complex for 40 grand. See where I'm going with this? Maybe 75 or 80 is more appropriate.
Ready, I'll make a motion.
I'll entertain a motion from anybody. Who's up?
I make a motion that the redevelopment commission authorize a not-to-exceed amount of $75,000 with final approval of all contracts to be to the redevelopment commission before authorization of payment.
I'll second that. And legal counsel.
And yes, thank you, and legal counsel.
Yes.
I'm
I'll
not
second
taking
that
notes,
motion.
but add that into the notes.
You'll second the amendment?
Did
to-
we get that from our
Yes.
lawyer who said and legal counsel? Okay.
So, okay, well, let's go ahead and take the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So thank you, Ben, for that information. Certainly appreciate it, and good luck. Keep us posted. We will. Thank you. So on that note, that is all of the new business, and we are ready to adjourn the meeting unless there's any other statements or business that needs to be brought in front of the commission.
I would like to ask Ben real quick, how's that Perry Development demolishing going? If I remember right, that was under our purview, wasn't it?
Ask that again, I didn't quite catch it.
The Perry
Industries?
Perry
Oh, yeah,
Industries
yeah.
Development. It
Yeah,
seems
so
stagnant.
I think they've got it primarily cleaned up. They still have some stuff they need to get out of there. The mayor and I met with the investment firm, gosh, it's probably been 6 weeks ago now, too. They're getting clean, and in fact, I think Kevin and I are gonna be meeting with someone that's helping on the development side. So we're gonna work with them to finalize some of their conceptual plans for the speculative building that they want to build there. So I would expect them to be coming in for planning approvals, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months
Okay.
for that. So they were getting really close to starting the actual building side now that they cleaned
I know
up side.
having Patterson Street kind of helped them, but,
Yeah,
but I know that there, probably some of the neighbors in there are tired of looking at the piles of brick too.
right, and it's been a challenging side. I think they discovered the extent of the dirty soil was
Sure.
more than what they even initially thought too. So it's taken them a little bit longer to get that corrected.
Okay, I just wanted to check
But
in.
yeah, we're getting close. Yeah, it's
Okay.
gonna be exciting.
I motion to adjourn.
Oh. Before we do that, do we have anything else, commissioners?
I simply would like to thank the commission and acknowledge Joe's work in bringing us together for a special session. As we talked a little informally, we felt this was imperative. I feel very passionate about this. I think this is critical. And I think the fact that my fellow commissioners took time out of their schedules to come to a special meeting, I want to thank you for that. And once again, I'm very proud to be a part of this group. Every time I drive downtown, I give a little smile because I've driven downtown a lot. And there's sometimes not been a lot to smile about, and there's a lot to smile. And I think this group, new and old, should accept a lot of responsibility for a lot of things that are happening. So I just want to say that I've been on boards that would say no, we meet once a month and that's it. And I know you all make big dollars for this. They don't, by the way, nobody, but taking your personal time, middle of the week, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you. Thank you. I will second Caleb's motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.